Hello friends, as discussed in the previous video, once we have identified the place of service, type of service, and the patient status, we are ready to locate the information in the medical record that identifies the key components of the service. So, in this tutorial, we are going to learn about the key components of the ENM coding. So, the three key components of the ENM coding are 1. The history, 2. Examination, 3. Medical decision making or MDM. Let's take up the first key component, that is the history first. So the history is the subjective information provided by the patient that the physician elicits regarding the chief complaint. There are four elements of a history. 1. The chief complaint or CC. 2. The history of present illness or an HPI. Review of systems or ROS. And lastly, the past family and social history or PFSH. In this video, we are going to learn about the chief complaint and HPI only. So, what is a chief complaint? A chief complaint is a concise statement describing the symptom, problem, condition, diagnosis, or any other factor that is the reason for the encounter, usually stated in the patient's own words. So, a chief complaint may be a somatic complaint from the patient, example, a headache or shortness of breath, or it may be a statement from the physician which defines the purpose for the visit, example, follow-up for hypertension. In short, a chief complaint defines the reason for the patient's visit. An important point to note is that all visits must have a chief complaint. An example of a chief complaint is, this 5-year-old child is seen in the office today complaining of runny nose. So, runny nose is the chief complaint in this case. Now, let's take up the history of present illness or an HPI. So, what is an HPI? An HPI is a chronological description of the development of the patient's present illness from the first sign and or symptom to the present. For example, patient tells the doctor that he is having headache since morning on the right side associated with vertigo. An important point here is about the follow-up visits, that it is acceptable to call the HPI as an interval history. So instead of giving the heading HPI, the physician may document interval history. Thus, from coding point of view, both are same, that is an HPI. Next important point regarding HPI is that both 1995 and 1997 ENM guidelines allow the HPI to be completed. In the box on the bottom of the slide, it is mentioned that CMS has allowed physicians to use 1997 guidelines for calculating the HPI, even if primarily the physician is using 1995 guidelines to calculate the ENM level. So, if we use the 1997 ENM guidelines, a detailed HPI may be completed by using either the HPI elements as per 1995 guidelines or the status of 3 chronic problems as per 1997 guidelines. This means that in clinical situations where there is no spontaneous somatic complaint from the patient, which can be further described using the HPI elements as per 1995 guidelines, the physician should use 1997 ENM guidelines to complete an extended HPI using the status of chronic problems. Thus, as per 1995 guidelines, we count the number of elements of a somatic problem, example pain, and as per 1997 guidelines, we count the status of chronic problems, example well-controlled hypertension. Finally, an HPI has two levels, brief and extended. Confused? Don't worry. We will discuss these ENM guidelines and the two levels in detail in the upcoming slides to understand how to calculate an HPI in the given medical record. Now let's discuss the HPI elements based on 1995 guidelines. So, as per 1995 ENM guidelines, there are total 8 HPI elements. These 8 elements are location, quality, severity, duration, timing, context, modifying factors, and associated signs and symptoms. Now let's understand these elements first. Then in the upcoming slides, we will understand them with some examples. First, location. Location is the site of the body for somatic complaint. For example, it could be the head, chest, arm, abdomen, etc. Quality. Quality is the sensation described by the patient of the somatic complaint. For example, the patient may describe his pain as throbbing, shooting, piercing, etc. Severity. Severity is the intensity of the complaint. For example, it could be mild, moderate, or severe. Or in case of pain, it may be documented by the pain scale, example 2 out of 10. Duration is for how long the problem or an episode is there. For example, patient may describe that he is having pain since last Sunday, or for 1 week, or for 1 month, or 1 year, etc. Timing. Timing is very similar to duration, and many coders confuse between these two. So, timing is the time when the complaint or problem occurs. For example, it could be an 8 a.m. or 9 p.m. or in morning, afternoon, evening, or twice a day, or 4 to 5 times in a week, etc. Next is context. Context is the background circumstances when the problem developed. For example, chest pain developed while climbing stairs. So climbing stairs is the context of the chest pain. Modifying factors are those factors which make the condition better or worse. For example, abdominal pain better by pressure, or itching worse by heat. Last element is the associated signs and symptoms. This means that whatever else is accompanying the chief complaint is associated sign or symptom. For example, chest pain along with nausea and vomiting. So nausea and vomiting would be an associated sign and symptom of the chest pain. Now, in order to calculate the level of HPI according to 1995 guidelines, we have to count the number of elements documented in the medical record. For example, in this slide, we assume that all 8 elements are documented and the total count is 8. Or in other words, the number of elements documented are 8. Now, let's discuss the HPI elements based on the 1997 guidelines. So as per 1997 ENM guidelines, we have to count the number of chronic problems along with their status. Important point is the status of the chronic problem must be documented. That is, whether the chronic problem is stable, worse, better, controlled, uncontrolled, etc. The verbiage could be anything. If status is not documented, then of course we cannot count that problem for our HPI as per 1997 guidelines. Thus, in this slide, we assume that the status of 3 chronic problems are documented and thus the total count is 3. Now, when we have understood both 1995 and 1997 ENM guidelines for HPI, let's understand the two levels of HPI, that is brief and extended. So, as per 1995 guidelines, there should be at least 1 and maximum 3 elements for brief HPI, and for extended HPI there must be at least 4 elements documented in the medical record. Of course, anything more than 4 is always an extended HPI. Thus, in the table, we see 4 plus for an extended HPI as per 1995 guidelines. And as per 1997 guidelines, there should be status of at least one chronic problem and maximum 2 chronic problems for a brief HPI, and for an extended HPI, there must be status of at least 3 chronic problems documented in the medical record. Again, of course, anything more than 3 is always an extended HPI. Now, let's understand this concept of calculating the HPI with some examples. So let's start with calculating the HPI using first the 1995 guidelines. Now, in this example, what is documented is the quality of the pain, that is the radiating, the location of the pain, that is the thigh or the right thigh, and the severity of the pain by the score of the 5 on the pain scale. So, the number of elements documented are 3 in this case. Therefore, the level of HPI would be brief. Now, in this example, what is documented is the quality of the pain, that is radiating, the location of the pain, that is the right thigh, the severity of the pain by the score of 5 on the pain scale. Of course, these 3 elements we have discussed in the previous slide. Now, continuing the example, here we have additional elements as well, which is duration, which is documented by the fact that pain began last Monday. Context is described as bending over while picking up an object on the floor, and timing is documented as several times throughout the week. So the number of elements documented in this case are 6: quality, location, severity, duration, context, and timing. Thus, our level of HPI is extended. Now let's take up an example of calculating the HPI as per 1997 guidelines. So in the given example, the patient came for follow-up for 3 chronic problems, and the 3 chronic problems are hypertension, diabetes, and rheumatoid arthritis. But here the status of the 3 chronic problems is also documented. For example, hypertension, which is well controlled, diabetes mellitus, which is poorly controlled, and rheumatoid arthritis, which is stable. So the status of total 3 chronic problems or chronic conditions is documented, and thus the level of HPI as per 1997 guidelines would be extended here. Finally, thank you for watching this video till the end. In the next tutorial, we will learn about the review of systems and the past, family, and social history of ENM coding. Please subscribe this channel if you like this video, and of course don't forget to click the bell icon to get the notification of new video uploaded in this channel. Thank you again.